Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Izzy Kirkby and I'm a nutritional therapist and a herbalist. I study nutritional therapy, herbal medicine and iridology and naturopathy at the College of Naturopathic Medicine. I now work with clients primarily specialising in women's health and hormones. So this can range from menopause, menstrual issues, thyroid issues, and of course, fertility. So the good news is that the protocols that I'll be sharing with you tonight, I have tried and tested and got success with, particularly around fertility. And as well as working with clients, I love educating and talking about natural medicine, and I also sell a range of herbal teas. You can find out more about me on my website, which is izzyliving.com. And if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, then please feel free to drop me an email. You can email me at izzy@izzyliving.com, or you can just drop me a message on Instagram. I'm on there at izzy.living. And before I start, I wanted to really share why I'm so passionate about talking about natural medicine, because what I see is that it's very sustainable, accessible, and affordable. What I'll be talking about tonight, things like making changes to your diet or adding in herbs that you can even grow in your own garden. So really what we can do is find our healing from just going to the supermarket. And although it sounds simple, these things are very safe but very powerful. So I'm very excited that you've chosen to join and listen along. So let's get started. I will be covering why I'm talking about hormonal balance and fertility. So really what sort of hormones we need to be thinking about when it comes to fertility and how they play a role. And then once we've discussed the hormones, then we want to think about how do you actually know if you have got a hormonal imbalance or any issues surrounding these hormones. So I'll be covering the common signs and symptoms and also the diagnostic tests that you can use. And then finally, the most important bit will be what we can actually do to balance our hormones. So I'll be sharing the fundamental principles of hormonal balancing and then specific protocols and case studies. So you have actionable points that you can take away and start doing straight away. So why hormonal balance and fertility? Well, hormones are always going to be involved in fertility because they're involved in everything that your body does. They are essentially the chemical messengers for your body, and therefore pretty much any infertility or difficulties with conceiving is going to be around hormones, unless then you might have something structural going on, something like adhesions of the fallopian tubes. So this might be involving ovulation issues. So that's about 25% of cases of fertility challenges. It might be related to the endometrial lining or the cervix. And then actually 25% of all cases are classed as unexplained infertility. And this is where it can get quite interesting, because a lot of the time in women, if they have difficulties with hormonal balance, it might be the signs and symptoms could be something like acne or heavy periods and period pain. Before you're trying to conceive, the GP will often use something like the contraceptive pill to mask those symptoms. And therefore, what happens is you come off the pill because you want to start getting ready to conceive, and then suddenly all these issues might reappear that you've been avoiding for all that time. So what we really want to do is think about how the hormones are working within the body, and therefore how we can address them and make sure you're as healthy as possible so you're able to conceive and also have a healthy pregnancy and baby. So really, as I said, hormones are going to be involved in fertility, but the key hormones that we tend to be thinking about are our sex hormones. And unsurprisingly, these are the ones that really play an essential role in reproduction. So we have a category of hormones called our androgens. So this will include things like testosterone or DHEA. And we also have estrogens. So I'll be talking about estrogen specifically throughout this presentation. However, there are different kinds of estrogens. So there is estradiol or estrone. But as I said, I'll be talking specifically about estrogen. And then we also have progestogens. So the common one I'll be talking about is progesterone. And all of these sex hormones are typically made in the ovaries or testes if you're a male, but they are also made in the adrenal glands, and they can be converted in tissues such as fat and also your liver tissue. So this gives you a bit of a clue as to what I'll be talking about. For example, the interaction between the adrenal glands, which manage your stress response. So we might be thinking about stress and its role with hormones, and also things like if they're converted in fat tissue, then things like obesity might be playing a role in liver health. But what is a hormonal imbalance? Well, essentially, it's either a deficiency or an excess of a certain hormone. So really, what you might see is something like a deficiency in estrogen or an excess of testosterone. However, it does get a bit complicated because all the hormones work in harmony together. So they're all creating a beautiful symphony. But so therefore, if one of the hormones is not performing properly, is a bit out of balance, then this will impact all the other ones. So potentially a deficiency of one hormone might show up as an excess of another. So for example, a deficiency in progesterone could also look like signs of excess estrogen. So really we need to be thinking about the ratios of the different hormones, as well as just whether you have a deficiency or an excess of one. We need to be thinking about them in harmony with them all, so that when one's working, the rest of them are. So I wanted to start with the fertility hormones that you may have heard about, may get tested for, which are very commonly tested for when you are starting your fertility journey. So the first one would be estrogen. So estrogen is really our feminizing hormone. It really kicks in when you go through puberty. So this would be the one that fills out the thighs, fills out the bottom, the breasts, and of course we'll be starting the menstrual cycle. So estrogen plays a very big role in the menstrual cycle. And as I said, all these hormones work together, and it actually stimulates another hormone called luteinizing hormone, which will be triggering our ovulation. And it also regulates our cervical mucus. So the cervical mucus is one aspect of fertility that sometimes people won't be conscious of. So what happens is our cervical mucus will change throughout the menstrual cycle. And whilst you're ovulating, that is when it's most hospitable, when it's most ready to accommodate sperm to fertilize the egg. And if you have issues with cervical mucus, this can be due to issues with estrogen as well. So when the cervical mucus is being not very friendly to sperm, and therefore they're having difficulties moving through to fertilize the egg. Now, the other hormone that we really want to be thinking about is progesterone. And this is very easy to remember because of the fact that pro is for and gest is for gestation. So we're thinking about progesterone, pro for gestation. So it is essential for establishing a pregnancy. And so progesterone is really required to prepare the uterus to allow for implantation of the egg. And then another hormone that is commonly tested would be the anti-Müllerian hormone. So this is actually tested to understand how many ovarian follicles are in your ovaries, and therefore how many potential eggs you have. So the ovarian follicles will release this hormone, and therefore if you have high levels of this hormone, then this can indicate you have high levels and a high ovarian reserve. But it can also be a marker for polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. Now we move on to follicular stimulating hormone, or FSH, and also luteinizing hormone, which is also known as LH. Now these are actually both produced in the pituitary gland, and they are stimulated during the menstrual cycle. So follicular stimulating hormone is stimulating our follicles, so getting them ready to grow, and then the luteinizing hormone will be when you're ready to release an egg. And it will also stimulate the production of estrogen. So when these hormones are going up and down throughout the cycle, they're all sending messages to each other to start increasing or decreasing. And prolactin is a hormone which actually inhibits follicular stimulating hormone. Now, prolactin, like progesterone, pro meaning for, lactin, we've got to think about lactose, lactation. So this is the hormone which is very much involved in breast milk production, but actually it can show up as high levels of prolactin can actually inhibit FSH and therefore be responsible for anovulation, so failure to ovulate. So it's another one that can commonly be tested because it's again a sign of something not being quite right with the hormones. However, having spoken about these ones, the ones I'm really going to be focusing on for this presentation are estrogen, progesterone, plus adding in your androgens, so testosterone, cortisol, and thyroid, because these are the major players. And if something is not going quite well with the other hormones, this can often be a result of the interaction with things like your estrogen or your thyroid or your cortisol. So what we really want to do is go to these big players, see what they're doing, and try and address the root cause of these imbalances. And then this should bring everything else into harmony. So a very common hormonal imbalance will be high estrogen or excess estrogen. And this can actually cause anovulation, so failure to ovulate. And I know I said estrogen is very much associated with regulating the menstrual cycle, but too much of it can actually cause issues with the menstrual cycle. And it's actually linked with conditions such as fibroids and endometriosis. Then we also have low estrogen, so we don't have enough estrogen. And this tends to be associated with menopause, but this can happen at any point in your life, depending on what is happening. And the signs of low estrogen would be the cervical mucus, which I referred to earlier, and also potentially like skipping periods. Then another very common imbalance would be with your progesterone levels. So low progesterone can be very common, and this can also show up as high estrogen. And low progesterone really means that you might have symptoms such as spotting between periods and perhaps sort of early miscarriages, because this is your endometrial lining not being able to develop properly. So it might lead to some bleeding between periods as it's building up, or potentially the inability to conceive. And then the next one would be our high androgens. So I'm going to be talking about testosterone in particular. As I mentioned, there are quite a few androgens, but generally what we see is elevated testosterone. And this is, again, becoming increasingly common, and it's associated with polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS, and generally will be interfering with regular menstrual cycles and the ability to ovulate. Then high cortisol. Now, cortisol is really the hormone that's produced by your adrenal glands as a response to chronic stress. So as you can imagine, a lot of us are going to have high cortisol. It's been a very stressful time, and therefore a lot of us will be under this chronic stress, which we're not used to. I think generally our lifestyles have become more stressful because we have got our mobile phones, we're not switching off from work, perhaps, there's difficulties with family, friends, relationships. We're required to manage a lot, and therefore pretty much all my clients will have issues with stress. But the issue is that if you do have high cortisol, this can interfere with your sex hormones. So it can interfere with the production of androgens and raise them. So we might see the link between high cortisol and polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it can also lower progesterone and your thyroid hormones. So the final one would be your thyroid, and in particular, low thyroid. So low levels of your thyroid hormones, again, very common, seeing it in a lot of my clients. And what happens is your thyroid is really the master hormone, and it governs like everything that's happening in your body. So again, like cortisol, it's playing a big role into with your sex hormones. So it can actually interfere with what your sex hormones are doing as well. So perhaps it might be raising your androgens, interfering with ovulation, and it's also linked to cyst formation. So again, we're seeing this link with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So these are the 6 that I'm going to be focusing on for this presentation, and what we need to be thinking about. What are the common signs and symptoms of these being out of whack? So this slide, I appreciate, is very, very busy. So if you want a copy of it, then please feel free to email me. My email izzy@izzyliving.com, and I can share it with you. But just to go through a few of the key points for each hormone. So first we have high cortisol. As I said, a lot of us will probably relate to some of these symptoms. So what we're thinking about is because we're in this sort of fight or flight mode, our body is quite wired, but because we've been doing it for a long time, you're going to feel tired. So you want to relax, you want to get to sleep and have a good night's sleep, but you've got that sort of energy and that worry that's sort of driving you. So this is a very common symptom of high cortisol. So you might have difficulty falling asleep, and you might feel anxious all the time with sort of no reason, or nervous. And you might also be feeling quick to anger because you feel like you're being threatened by this sort of constant level of stress. Another few other common symptoms of high cortisol is putting weight around the abdomen, and also difficulty recovering from physical injury, and also stretch marks, eczema. Very much high levels of cortisol can interfere with the skin, which is why actually a lot of people are prescribed cortisone and will then have skin issues and also putting on weight. So the next hormone to be thinking about would be your progesterone, and progesterone very much associated with PMS, so premenstrual syndrome. So getting mood swings around that time, getting painful swollen breasts before your periods, and also, as I mentioned, so there might be spotting before your periods, you might have irregular menstrual cycles, and also interesting symptoms would be clumsiness and coordination. So yeah, these are very common symptoms of low progesterone, and also headaches is very another common symptom. And then we think about our excess estrogen. So estrogen is, as I said, it's the one that develops your hips and your thighs, and this is a big symptom around rapid weight gain around hips and bottom can be due to excess estrogen. Also water retention, bloating, puffiness, and other sorts of, it's a bit like a growth hormone. So this is why it can stimulate things like endometriosis, fibroids, grow your endometrial lining, so you might have heavy periods. And there's the emotions around estrogen, very much like weepiness, mood swings, just crying when you don't know why, and also things like anxiety and headaches as well. So these are very common symptoms with excess estrogen. Whereas with low estrogen, you have that emotional fragility, but it's more around some depression, anxiety. You might find your memory is lacking, or perhaps you're suffering from some vaginal dryness, a lower libido. Estrogens are very lubricating, so also like dry eyes and dry skin. This can be signs of low estrogen. Then moving on to the excess androgens. So this can be things like excess hair where you don't want it. So it might be on your chest, also acne, greasy skin. And also, although you might be getting excess hair on your body, you might be getting thinning head hair, which is nobody wants really, because this is actually a specific type of androgen, which is dihydrotestosterone, which is associated with male pattern baldness. So this actually can be quite a common symptom. You're getting hair where you don't want it and then losing it where you want to keep it. As well as the relationship between your blood sugar levels and testosterone. So you might have unstable blood sugar. Basically, your blood sugar levels can drive up testosterone production. And again, things like cysts, pain during your cycle, and depression, anxiety, fatigue. So they're all playing a big role in our emotions as well. And then finally, the thyroid. So as I said, the thyroid is the master hormone. So actually the symptoms of low thyroid can be very varied, but common ones would be hair loss again, and particularly sort of the outer third of the eyebrows. That can be a good sign for thyroid issues in particular. Also dry skin, dry hair, brittle fingernails and putting on weight. And a very common one I see would be cold hands and feet, sort of poor circulation. So yeah, thinking about that, and if any of these symptoms you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is me, what do I do? Well, what we really want to do is think about getting answers. So the best way would be getting a diagnostic test. So you can go to your GP, or you can go to a naturopath, which can give you access to sort of private laboratories that might be providing sort of more of an in-depth analysis. So for example, with your sex hormones, so testing for your estrogen, progesterone, etc., your GP can run a blood test, but there are also other tests such as the Dutch test, which is a dried urine test, that will sort of measure the metabolites of your sex hormones to find out how they're being detoxified through the liver. Also your cortisol, this is usually tested with a urine or a saliva test because your cortisol levels will fluctuate throughout the day. So what you want to be doing is testing your cortisol levels in the morning, afternoon, evening, etc., to see what the picture is. And then your thyroid hormone. So you could probably do a whole talk, in fact, you can definitely do a whole talk on the diagnostic tests for thyroid. But the really important thing to note is that the NHS tend to just test for thyroid stimulating hormone, which is TSH. What you really want to do is get a full thyroid panel, so checking for your T4, T3, so these are sort of the thyroid hormones. You also want to test for the uptake of the T3 and potentially reverse T3. So it's basically giving you a bigger picture of what's happening with the thyroid hormones, not just thyroid stimulating hormone. Because often I'll have clients which show up fine for the thyroid stimulating hormone, and then you do a bigger test, you do a bigger panel, and that's where you see the potential issues. So just a quick note, this is probably a good one to work with a naturopath or sort of maybe a more in-depth endocrinologist if you're thinking, oh gosh, the thyroid symptoms really apply to me, but your TSH levels are coming up fine. And this is something that you can definitely do further diagnostics on, so don't worry. Then the other two tests I would really recommend would be vitamin D. And vitamin D actually is a hormone, and luckily very, very inexpensive to test. Most GPs will do this. So checking your vitamin D levels, ensuring they're in range. And also thinking about insulin, because there's a big connection between insulin and fertility. So what we want to do generally, they're going to be testing for your fasting blood glucose levels or your HbA1c, which is your blood glucose levels over a long period of time. And this will really indicate whether your insulin sort of being able to take out the sugar from your blood and drive it into your cells. Because if you have got high blood sugar, then this can sort of decrease your sensitivity to the insulin hormone, and this is very much linked with things like type 2 diabetes, but also it's very much linked with polycystic ovarian syndrome and other metabolic conditions. So this is one that we do want to be thinking about as well. So now that we've talked about potentially what could be happening with the hormonal imbalances, let's actually focus on getting a solution. So how can we actually balance our hormones? How can we really support our fertility by finding the root cause of what's happening? So I have a 6-step approach, which is you can follow to really go through each of the root cause issues around the hormones, and therefore it's really good for building a foundation for fertility. So really what we want to be thinking about is our liver health and detoxification, our digestion, our thyroid, reducing stress, looking at our diet and our lifestyle, and then we can also think about the key nutrients that we might be deficient in, or potentially some herbs that are really going to help us with our sort of bespoke needs in terms of everyone's going to have slightly different variations in terms of what I'm talking about, but this is when you can get more bespoke in thinking about the herbs and the nutrients that you specifically need. So let's start with the liver and detoxification. This is a big topic actually, because women are unfortunately suffering from the amount of chemicals that are in our environment, because Our liver is required not just to process external chemicals, so this might be pesticides in food, it might be chlorine in the water, alcohol, medications, drugs, etc. But it's also required to actually detoxify our internal hormones. So the hormones are produced by our body naturally. So what can happen is if our liver's too busy processing all these chemicals and toxins, trying to keep us healthy, trying to keep us staying alive, then it doesn't have time and energy to be dealing with our own internal hormones. So this can actually be a big reason why we see things like excess estrogen coming up. And this is a really big link between why alcohol is very much linked towards breast cancer, because again, our body if we're drinking too much, and our liver's not being able to process sort of these hormones, which can be then linked to hormonal dependent cancers. So what we want to do is take the burden off the liver as much as possible. And we also want to think about how we can support detoxification. But just another point, a lot of these chemicals actually, to make things slightly worse, a lot of these chemicals have hormone-like effects on our body. So these are things called xenoestrogens. And xenoestrogens are, as I said, they mimic estrogen, they mimic like our endogenous estrogen. And therefore, this is why excess estrogen is very, very common, not just in women, but also men, because if you think about it, there are a lot of estrogens in our tap water. They're from medication, for example, from the contraceptive pill. There are estrogens in plastics, xenoestrogens this is, also pesticides, etc. A lot of these common toxins actually have a double effect. Not only are they, our liver is required to process them, but they're also having an estrogen-like impact on our body. So really, it is really important. I cannot stress enough how important it is to think about your environment and think about the chemicals in your household. Think about the beauty products you're using. Going on something like the environmentalworkinggroup.org, you can actually go and put in a list of your makeup products and it will say how toxic they are. So you can try and find ones that are safer, slightly cleaner and greener. Also, as I said, thinking about your chemicals, thinking about your food choices. So yes, organic food can be more expensive and harder to get hold of, but there are additional benefits, not just sort of supporting the environment, you're supporting yourself. Thinking about your water, thinking about your air, are there ways to, add in water filters or air purifiers? So this is sort of going to be individual according to sort of the lifestyle that you're leading. But this is a really good way to actually have a detox without doing a specific, quite intense detoxification protocol. I think it's more important to reduce the burden that your liver is facing by thinking about your environment. But then also what we really want to do is add in the foods that love our liver, that are going to support our liver to start detoxifying. So our green leafy vegetables. So there's a whole family, the brassica or the cruciferous vegetable family, which is things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, kale, everyone's favorites really. They're sort of less popular, but they are absolutely fantastic for the liver. They contain these plant compounds which really support liver detoxification. And other types of foods, things like garlic and onions and citrus fruits like lemons, they're also lovely for the liver. And adding in herbs like turmeric, we have so much research about the benefits that turmeric has on the liver as well. Other herbs which I'll come on to later, things like dandelion, burdock, these are also great to add into your diet. Now, not only do we want to think about the liver, but we also want to support other channels of elimination. So our liver, we associate the liver as our sort of main organ of detoxification, but what happens to the toxins? Once it's done the detoxification, they need to be excreted. So it might be through sweat, through the skin. So what we want to do is get sweating, doing saunas, also opening up the pores, doing things like dry skin brushing. Also, they need to be eliminated. They might be eliminated through our lungs as gases. So practicing deep breathing. There's so many benefits to just sorting out your breathing process, because also the action of breathing from your diaphragm actually massages your internal organs, which also gives a lovely little boost to the liver. So if any of you are into yoga, then this is you'll be very familiar with the different breathing techniques. And also our lymphatic system. So our lymphatic system you can support by doing lymphatic massage and also movement, because your lymphatic system is, if you think about your capillaries and your veins for your blood, the lymph also is all around your body, but they don't have a heart to like pump it up and down. So instead what they rely on is movement to move the lymph around. So yeah, putting your legs up on the wall will help the lymph, and also just doing more movement and exercise. And obviously there are lots of benefits to doing exercise anyway. And also we want to support our kidneys, so staying hydrated, getting lots of water, getting lots of lovely herbs as well that support our kidneys, things like parsley as well. So once we've thought about our liver and the elimination through our liver, the biggest form of elimination will probably be your bowels, getting rid of a lot of these toxins through bowel movements. So a very important thing to address would be constipation. And what can happen is the bacteria, the gut microbiome, there are certain types of little microorganisms in our gut that actually feed off estrogens. So what can happen is, our liver's done all its hard work, but if our gut microbiome is not in the sort of optimal state, it's not got the right ratios of the different microbes, what can happen is the microbes can feed off estrogens and recirculate them around the body. So you've done all the hard work on the liver, but you really need the gut to be working so that you can actually properly eliminate to reduce any of these sorts of hormonal imbalances related to excess estrogen. So first of all, we want to be promoting regular bowel movements. So this is, again, getting the basics right. So staying hydrated, exercising, increasing your fiber, increasing vegetables, particularly some of the bitter vegetables. So again, these dark green leafy vegetables tend to be very bitter, tend to get things moving. And as well, thinking about herbs you can add in, thinking about maybe chicory, radish. These sorts of bitter plants, they're very, very good at supporting digestion and elimination. And also just wanted to mention that a lot of the times, what our body is actually designed to squat when we are passing a bowel movement. So therefore, just the act of sitting on the loo can inhibit any bowel motions. So what you need to do is think about elevating your legs, so you can get a thing called a squatty potty, and this will actually change your body's position to make it easier to pass the stool. So again, thinking about the basics, thinking about water, eating, and also just sitting correctly to pass a bowel movement. Now, what we also want to do is thinking about removing things that may cause constipation and also may cause an increase in the microbes, which are not going to be that helpful for our hormonal health. So this would be our refined sugar and carbohydrates. So our white flour products, so white pasta, bread, biscuits, cakes, and any of the sugars, again, biscuits, cakes, chocolate, etc. These are really going to be supporting the growth of the microbes that we don't want, whereas our vegetables are going to be promoting the health and the growth of the microbes that we do want. So what we really want to do is also remove these refined sugar and carbohydrate products. And it's not just about removal. It's very unpopular to tell people to remove refined sugars, but what we can do is add in things. So we're adding in our vegetables, and we can also think about things that promote diversity in our gut microbiome. So these would be our probiotic type foods, which you can find in fermented foods such as kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, these lovely products that can actually support a really diverse microbiome. And then you can think about adding other lovely foods such as bone broths or cabbage soups, and these are also going to support repairing the gut lining if there's any sort of inflammation or intestinal permeability. So there are lots of ways that you can really support your digestion and gut health. So this is very vital for supporting fertility as well, due to the role it plays in hormonal health. Now, once we've also focused on gut health, we then want to think about our thyroid. As I said, it's the master, basically it's the master of our hormones. So it can really influence every other hormone in our body. And unfortunately, back to the point I was making about detoxification, there are chemicals that can also disrupt the thyroid. So for example, bisphenol A, BPA, which is found in plastics, that can disrupt our thyroid. And there are also certain minerals which can also displace iodine in our thyroid. So iodine is really required for our thyroid to function, and a lot of us might be iodine deficient, and that might be through diet. We might not be consuming enough fish or seaweeds, but also what can happen is we have bromides, fluorides, and chlorides, which can displace iodine because they're higher up on the periodic table. So you can go back to your sort of chemistry lessons and check the periodic table, but basically everything that's higher than iodine can actually displace it. So bromine, so these bromides can be found in flame retardants, which is very common in furniture. Chlorides, chlorine. So chlorine is found in our tap water. It's used to sterilize water. So on the one sense, it's supporting you, but on the other sense, it's probably not. So you might want to, once it's been sterilized, you can then filter out the chlorine using a water filter. And also bromides, fluorides. So yes, unfortunately, again, the fluoride in your toothpaste might also be disrupting your thyroid. So these things are, again, things you want to think about in terms of if you do have low thyroid function. And also there are foods called goitrogens, which can inhibit thyroid function. So goitrogens basically means inhibit thyroid function. And the goitrogen categories of foods would be things like soy, also the raw cruciferous vegetables, so things like raw broccoli. Luckily, not many people want to eat raw broccoli, but having said that, if you are doing a lot of green juices and really into that, then that can actually inhibit your thyroid function. Also things like yams and cassavas as well. So you can do a quick check for goitrogenic foods. And then, of course, what we want to do is think about what's going to support our thyroid. So I've mentioned iodine, and also other nutrients would be selenium, zinc, and iron, and vitamin D. And then finally, just a quick note that if you have an autoimmune thyroid condition, something like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, then gluten can be a big trigger for this. So another thing maybe you want to think about removing from your diet, depending on what's happening. Okay, so reducing stress. Now, this one is definitely easier said than done. But I do think this is very, very important, not just for our health, but also we are doing this in order to get pregnant, and therefore you need to be making space in your life for that baby. So therefore it's a good idea to start now to tell your body, you know, there is space for a baby to come along, and often that can actually help with the conception process already, because your body is going to prioritize its survival. So if it thinks that you're stressed, then reproduction is going to be very low on the priority list. It's just going to keep you alive. So really finding ways to reduce the stress can actually be very, very positive for fertility, as well as, of course, actually reducing and addressing any hormonal imbalances that are going on. So where can you make these changes in your work or in your personal life? Maybe, again, this is very personal. So some people love meditation, some people just do not get on with it. But if you're not a fan of meditation, there are loads of other things you can do, like getting massages, doing breath work, dancing, anywhere that you can really find an outlet that helps you switch off, perhaps doing something with your hands, getting quite creative. So you're going to switch out of that fight or flight mode, something that just feels you more rested and restorative. And then, of course, we want to help our body. Really cope with stress, because we're always going to be under some sort of stress. So thinking about making sure you've got adequate levels of magnesium, vitamin C, B vitamins, omega-3. And then there's also a category of herbs called adaptogens. So adaptogens are these herbs which have been shown to reduce the impact of stress on the body. So there's quite a big list, but some popular ones would be things like licorice, reishi, and ashwagandha. They also can support hormonal balance as well. So I'll be talking about those later on. Then once we've done all this, then it's time to really think about our diet as well. So I've spoke about removing the refined sugars and carbohydrates. And it's one of those where actually it can be quite difficult to do, but if you're adding in lots of other foods, then it can make it a lot easier as your gut microbiome slowly changes and adjusts, because it's not just a case of willpower, it's not just a case of cutting them out. And as I mentioned, there are certain microbes that are actually craving them and telling your body to eat these things. So it's when you're doing the other stuff, then it does get a lot easier. But yes, there is a big connection between inflammation, obesity, high blood sugar, and fertility. So this is a really big one that we want to be focusing on from a diet perspective. Also removing trans fats. So these are going to be found in a lot of processed foods. These are our hydrogenated vegetable oils. And in fact, so these are associated with infertility related to ovulation, but in fact any sort of vegetable oil, so we're thinking sunflower oil, rapeseed oil in particular, but also maybe peanut oil, these are very high in omega-6. And because pretty much every processed food is going to have sunflower oil in, so you just need to look at your sauces, your pestos, hummuses, anything that's sort of fried, crisps, etc. We are exposed to a lot of omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory. So it causes inflammation in the body. So it'd be really beneficial to just look at the oils you're cooking with, take them out and swap them for something more like olive oil, coconut oil, ghee, butter. And these are not going to be promoting sort of the omega-6 as much as these sort of seed oils. So just a general note as well, thinking about your essential fatty acids. Then, of course, alcohol. Now, we are thinking we need to be really prioritizing liver health. So if you're drinking alcohol, this is going to be disrupting the liver and its ability to clear hormones. So I would definitely, give it a miss for time leading up to conception, or maybe just, layering down to just have a really nice, good quality glass of wine with a meal. And not every night either, perhaps like once a week. And then cigarettes, this does sound, it's probably quite obvious to a lot of people, but obviously there is the connection between cigarettes and fertility, and even social smoking will impact the ability to get pregnant. And then finally, caffeine. So caffeine is a really good thing to think about, because perhaps your caffeine levels, if you are needing a lot of coffee, then this can be a sign of issues with your adrenal glands. So basically high cortisol, because you're needing coffee to support you, or any caffeinated drinks, whether it's sort of Diet Coke, etc. But yeah, basically anything the equivalent of 6 cups of coffee a day in caffeine or more is actually, research has been shown to be associated with low fertility. But even if you're needing less than 6 cups and you just really need them to wake up, then this is a really good indicator of cortisol levels. So one to definitely be thinking about. So then here are sort of some of my favorite nutrients that a lot of people might be deficient in, and also, just getting more of them in your diet we know is going to support hormonal health. So zinc, this is a big one. It's fantastic for regulating things like testosterone, estrogen levels, really required for our hormone function. And so we want a lot of zinc in our diet. Unfortunately, it's quite low in a lot of foods, but you can get a lot of it in oysters, shellfish, meats, grains, seeds, and pulses, but this might be one that we might need to supplement with. Vitamin D, I mentioned before, this is very low levels, very much linked with infertility. So getting a vitamin D tested will be really helpful. And the best way to supplement vitamin D is getting into the sun, doing some, naked sunbathing, getting it all over your body. But unfortunately, if you're living in the UK, this will be less possible. So you can get it through the diet, but it tends to just be liver, fish, eggs, and also mushrooms that have been exposed to sunlight. They can convert into vitamin D, but another one which is commonly supplemented with. Vitamin E. Now, this is lovely for reproductive health. Vitamin E, very rich in our nuts, seeds, avocados, our greens. Also B vitamins, again, greens, seeds, nuts, grains, meat as well. So lots of different types of B vitamins, which are also associated with infertility. So making sure our B12, B3, B6, folate, etc. is adequate. Then magnesium. So actually, I think it's about 70% of the population are deficient in magnesium because it gets really zapped up when we are stressed. So as you can imagine, a lot of us are deficient in magnesium. So again, green vegetables, these are very high in magnesium. Chlorophyll actually contains magnesium, just like sort of our blood is based on iron. Plants' blood, the chlorophyll is based on magnesium. So anything green in plants will be rich in magnesium. But then also be in our legumes, nuts, seeds, grains, and also cacao. So they say that craving chocolate is a sign of magnesium deficiency. And also really lovely because it can be absorbed through the skin. So I love telling my clients to have magnesium baths. They're a really lovely way of supplementing magnesium. And iron, very big one, we want to be thinking about as well. So iron, best sources are going to be meat and very high in liver. And then, of course, it's going to be found in beans, nuts, leafy vegetables, etc. And then finally, selenium. So selenium, I think they say about 7 Brazil nuts will give you the amount of selenium you require for your recommended daily allowance. And yeah, another lovely mineral that we want to be potentially getting more into our diet. So consuming more Brazil nuts. So let's move on to the herbs. So just as a little note for herbal medicine, because if, for example, you have got irregular periods, there are herbs that can help bring on periods, and these are called emmenagogues. But these are obviously going to be contraindicated for whilst you're trying to conceive, because you really don't want a period if you've just conceived. So just a quick note, with the herbs, you might probably want to be working with a herbalist. So also they can work out specific herbs that are going to be very supportive for you. But I just want to give you some idea of how much herbs can help, and some of them sort of very gentle that you can bring into your diet as well. So I mentioned before the adaptogen category. So we have lots of lovely supporting herbs that can help us deal with stress. And they also have lots of other benefits, such as like reducing our blood sugar levels and supporting our immune system. So ashwagandha is a very popular one. Siberian ginseng and reishi. Reishi is actually a mushroom, very good for the liver. And shatavari. Now this is very much it's an Ayurvedic fertility tonic. So very, very lovely herb there. And then we also want to think, going back to our foundations of health, we want to think about also supporting the liver. So herbs that support the liver are something called hepatics. So we have licorice, which is also an adaptogen, but it's very supportive for the liver, also great for the immune system, also great for polycystic ovarian syndrome. Licorice is very commonly used for that. Then we have Schisandra. Schisandra, again, great for the liver, also great for the kidneys. And St. John's wort really supports detoxification. But unfortunately, it's so good at detoxification that it will detoxify any medication you're on. So it is contraindicated if you are taking medication, because it'll get you excreting that out of your body before you've even experienced the effects, unfortunately. And then also milk thistle, which is very regenerative for the liver. Then for supporting our digestion, dandelion, obviously we've all got that in your back gardens or in parks, etc. It's very abundant and it's lovely for digestion and also the liver. There's also types of herbs which contain a compound called berberine. So we have berberis, we also have golden seal. So berberine, which is this compound found in these plants, has been studied and has been shown to be as effective as metformin for reducing levels of blood sugar. So actually, berberine containing plants such as berberis and bayberry can be used in polycystic ovarian syndrome when metformin is needed. Not always, but it might be something that's worth looking into. And then also what we want is lovely things that are actually just going to support our digestion, sort of aromatic herbs. So motherwort, some lovely mint, which also supports the uterus. It isn't a menagogue, but can be used if you have got an irregular menstrual cycle. It not only supports the digestion, but it will also support menstrual cycle. And angelica is another one like that, and it's actually a very warming bitter herb. So a lot of my clients need warming up. They can be very cold, so this helps move, gets the liver, gets digestion going, and also sort of moving and warming the uterus as well. Then there are also herbs which work specifically more thinking about how they impact our hormones. So the classic one would be Vitex agnus castus for low progesterone. So Vitex, very popular for polycystic ovarian syndrome, also for supporting progesterone levels, so preventative for miscarriage, things like that. Then we have Dong Quai, which is also, sort of its botanical name is Angelica sinensis. Dong Quai is sort of slightly phytoestrogenic, but it's lovely for building periods and regulating menstrual cycles, helpful in painful periods. White peony, now this is lovely as well. These are all lovely herbs. White peony is fantastic for actually reducing testosterone. And then we have wild yam, which is also slightly sort of phytoestrogenic as well. Lovely, very popular in menopause actually for increasing sort of like vaginal lubrication and things like that. So let's talk about some specific protocols for these hormonal conditions. So the first one be excess estrogen. So just going through building the foundation, what we want to do is support the liver to metabolize the estrogen. We want to support the gut for removing the estrogen. And then thinking about adding in organic food. So we're limiting our environmental exposure to estrogens, perhaps limiting dairy products. Obviously, these are actually going to be high in animal estrogens. And removing alcohol. And another thing you can do actually is increasing your phytoestrogens. So these are your plant estrogens, which I just mentioned about sort of Dong Quai. So phytoestrogens tend to have this protective effect. So unlike xenoestrogens, which can come in and give you symptoms of excess estrogen, phytoestrogens can help clear them because they're blocking the estrogen receptors. So things like flaxseed, your legumes as well, so lentils, chickpeas, etc. These are very lovely to get more in. And then from a supplement perspective, you can look at perhaps with broccoli sprouts. So these very high in sulforaphane, they're going to support your liver to detox. Rosemary as well, very supportive of the liver, and also calcium D-glucarate. So calcium D-glucarate can actually support with the gut for the estrogen removal. So I thought I'd bring in some case studies of actual clients that I've had. And I did have a client who was 32 and she had very much the symptoms of estrogen excess. So that in the thighs and the buttocks, also a red flushed face, eczema, very much can be to do with sort of estrogen, and particularly the difficulty digesting fat, actually, because it can interfere with bile production in the gallbladder. So gallstones actually can be related to estrogen levels. But what I wanted to do was really focus on the detoxification. So I was supporting her liver and her digestion, as I mentioned. I was using some herbs such as milk thistle, schisandra, and burdock, which was lovely as well because it meant that her skin cleared up, her eczema cleared up, and obviously just helped with her hormonal balance, so she was able to get pregnant very quickly. Then we have low progesterone. So low progesterone, what you really want to be doing is thinking about reducing stress, which can impact on the progesterone levels. So you support the adrenal glands, also thyroid, liver, detoxification. This is going to be in everything really. And then again, removing things like caffeine and alcohol. And I mentioned Vitex agnus castus being a fantastic one to support progesterone. And equivalents for that would be something like vervain and saffron. They seem to have a similar mode of action. And you also want to be thinking about supplementing things to support the body, so things like vitamin C, calcium, magnesium, and B vitamins. So these are going to be really lovely for reducing stress and supporting therefore progesterone. So I had a client who had very, very common progesterone symptoms, regular periods, headaches, PMS, spotting between periods. So this automatically triggered progesterone levels. So I focused on reducing stress, getting rid of those refined carbohydrates, getting rid of sort of the white bread, the white pastas, and adding in some lovely supplements and herbs. And I used Vitex agnus castus in this situation, which was great. She got her periods became regular, and she was able to conceive. So it took about 4 months to sort of go through that process. Then we have excess testosterone. So excess testosterone, we really want to be removing the refined sugars and carbohydrates due to the insulin link pushing up our testosterone levels. We want to be reducing stress, supporting liver, exercise, because that can also improve insulin sensitivity, and perhaps thinking about low dairy, high fiber diet. These are all been shown to be quite supportive. So there are lots of herbs that can help. I mentioned licorice and white peony, also cinnamon, which can also sensitize blood sugar levels. And there are a couple of herbs such as saw palmetto and spearmint, which can also reduce certain types of androgens. From a supplement perspective, zinc, very big one, vitamin D, magnesium, getting omega-3s, and also inositol and N-acetylcysteine. These can be lovely at supporting the liver as well with the detoxification, and also inositol is very good for balancing blood sugar. So with this one, had a client with sort of quite classic presentation of polycystic ovarian syndrome, so it'd be excess body hair, acne, and there's also digestive issues. So we went straight for the low carbohydrate diet. We had to take out dairy, but then added in things that were going to support her digestion, which again makes these changes in the diet a lot easier if you're promoting your digestion and regulating gut microbiome. And then a lovely sort of calming licorice and cinnamon tea. So this is quite a while ago actually, because her son's now 3 years old, but great results with this: digestion, skin and periods. So all her symptoms were able to clear up. So then finally I will talk about supporting the thyroid. So here we want to support liver and detoxification. We want to address our gut issues. Then think about removing gluten and these goitrogens. So maybe it's the soy, maybe it's cruciferous vegetables. Then we want to detox our bromides, fluorides and chlorides. Add in our sea vegetables, so our seaweeds. So we're getting more iodine. And then there are some lovely herbs which can actually promote the thyroid production of thyroid hormones, so ashwagandha, and then also guggul and coleus. These are very specific for supporting low thyroid function. And we want to be supplementing with iodine, selenium, zinc, and vitamin D. And so again, another client who classic signs of sort of hypothyroidism, so poor circulation, constipation, and also charting low on the basal body temperature. So this is actually quite a good home test you can do. So essentially what you'd be doing is measuring your temperature as soon as you wake up, first thing in the morning. And if it's sort of below, 36.7-ish, maybe even 37, then on a regular basis, so excluding sort of after you ovulate, so on average, if it's below those sorts of levels, then that can be an indication of your thyroid function. So a nice at-home test that you can do before perhaps going for a more in-depth diagnostic blood test. And for this one, we're focusing on detoxification again, the digestion. And so what we had was bowel movement sorted, more energy, and successfully conceived as well. So in summary, as I said, what we really want to do is build our foundation for hormonal balance. So this will be through supporting our digestion, nourishing the liver, and reducing stress. And then adding in our lifestyle changes. So this might be changes in the diet, it might be living more of a low toxic lifestyle. And then we want to target specific issues. So finding these herbs, these supplements that are really going to support your hormones. So what I would say is, if you're thinking about preconception planning, best to start as soon as possible. So ideally, it'd be great to allow 6 to 12 months for these changes for your body, but the sooner the better is always going to be preferable. And then of course involving your partner, because what I just laid out really can be done by them too, and it's really going to support their health as well, and making these changes is just as important for them too. And of course, it can be overwhelming. I had to rush through a lot of information. So, work with a specialist. You can then access different diagnostic tests. You get these more personalized recommendations for what's going on. And, you can build a bit of a team in your corner so you don't feel as overwhelmed. Perhaps seeing nutritional therapist, herbalist, acupuncturist, whatever you feel you need to feel confident and find what's right and what's going to work for you. And then my final piece of advice would be to just enjoy it and have fun. So we know that stress is going to be a big contributing factor. So if we can reduce the stress and we can find ways to really just enjoy and just enjoy the journey. So, for example, you might discover a passion for making homemade kombucha because you want to get your fermented foods in, or perhaps you're like, this is a great excuse to get more creative and start painting because I need to reduce my stress. So, just finding the ways that are going to make it appeal to you. A lot of these things your body will thank you for, so you'll feel better. So there's a lot of motivation there, but don't make it a chore, make it enjoyable and pleasurable for you and your partner. So just wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I hope this was helpful. And if you do have any questions, as I said, please get in touch. So my email again is izzy@izzyliving.com, or you can find my website, which is www.izzyliving.com. If you are interested in learning more about natural medicine and how you can support your health and how you can go on this journey and support not just yourself, but your friends, families, or maybe even work with clients, then CNM, the College of Naturopathic Medicine, do offer courses in nutritional therapy, herbal medicine, and naturopathy, which I studied, as well as other disciplines like acupuncture and homeopathy. So really, like I've been sharing in this presentation, learning about how to take a naturopathic approach to health. So we're working with understanding the root cause, not just addressing the symptoms, really promoting health and really understanding ways in how we can support our health using natural medicine. So you can also get in touch with CNM to learn more about their courses. And if you have been asking anything on the web chat box, then you just need to indicate to CNM that they can share your contact details with me for GDPR purposes. But apart from that, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you.
I'd lasted about 3 months at uni, trying to be a dancer and do English and do all the right things, but it wasn't actually my passion. And I heard about CNM, so I went to an open evening, and Charlotte Gerson from the Gerson Therapy was there. And oh my gosh, she was just amazing. She blew me away with some of the things that she was saying about how the body could actually heal itself. And I signed up for a 5-year course that very day and absolutely loved it. I just kept learning from then on in because CNM offered so many good courses. And as soon as I qualified, I thought, now's the time to do something with this. So literally within 6 months, I'd been able to set up practice. I personally employ CNM students or CNM graduates. We have 5 CNM graduates here in different capacities, like as a nutritionist or an advisor within the shop, or even as a herbalist. The knowledge that they have is absolutely amazing, and I can trust them. I can really trust them with my clients. I've built up a business over the past 18 years, and that reputation is everything to me. So knowing that the CNM graduates have the right knowledge and also have the confidence to speak with my clients is great. I have no qualms about bringing on students because I know how good they are.
Well, I was looking to finish my old job, and I wanted to put myself in an environment where I was surrounded by herbs or nutrition or that kind of thing. Because I knew if I didn't make the switch, I'd probably just carry on doing my old job and not giving it up because of the money, basically. So yeah, and Gabby was looking for someone, so that's when I made that switch about 1.5 years ago.
I've now been lecturing for the CNM for about 6 years, and I lecture across the board as in the nutrition field, naturopathic field, and for the herbalism as well. And I love it. I think the lectures are so well structured. I love the information on the slides. I love the fact that it really brings it together quite cohesively for a student when they're then writing assignments about it. My husband often says to me, "You're so lucky that you love your job," and it's true, because if I won the lottery, I know full well nothing would change. I love what I do, and when clients are sitting with me, they actually say, "I can feel your passion, you love what you do, don't you?" I say, "I love it."
My name is Melissa Catt and I studied nutrition with CNM in Cork. So my favourite part about the course in CNM was the clinics. I found it really gave me the confidence that I needed to actually go out and practice on my own afterwards. I think without that I probably wouldn't have gone straight into my own practice. So after I graduate, I've opened my own clinic, so Nona Nutrition, and I plan on specialising in women's health and pregnancy nutrition. I always had an interest in nutrition, and I was always doing small nutrition courses, but then when I found CNM, I just knew it was the college for me, and I was working in a health store at the time, so it just kind of went hand in hand for me to do it. So CNM has changed both mine and my family's life, because I now have the knowledge to support us health-wise, and it's given me the opportunity to become self-employed and to work my hours around my family and my clinic as well. I would recommend the course to someone else. I think if you've an interest in nutrition, it's definitely the course for you. The content is fantastic. The clinics give you the confidence that you need to go out and be a successful practitioner.